Who is the most important defensive player for the Houston Texans?
To me, and everybody's talked about the addition of Hunter or adding Autrey until he got suspended, or the fact that the next year of Will Anderson and how dominant the two ends can be. To me, the more I looked at it and thought about it, it's Al-Shaair. It's the fact that we looked at what the linebacking core was, and more importantly, where they were lacking last year. And Christian Harris's injury is also factored into this. But to me, to have a guy that can be the quarterback of the defense that DeMeco trusts, that knows, and on the flip side, he knows DeMeco's defense, that is just wreaking havoc all over the field. He's plugging up the gaps in the runs that the defensive line isn't capable of getting to. He's covering things in the flat, and he's athletic, and he hits hard, and when he tackles, he normally brings guys down. He is a guy that you absolutely put all your trust in and then just let him go because he knows where he has to be and what he needs to do. And I think that's so important. They didn't have that last year. I didn't feel confident with that last year. And I think from the standpoint this year, with all the weapons you have and all the different places that they can come from, to have a guy that can kind of keep it all grounded and has the grasp on it and still play at a very high level. I know that there are bigger names out there, but the one that I really liked when they signed that I really believe is going to be an impact in this regard is Al-Shaair.
I like Al-Shaair a lot. Knows DeMeco's system, looks up to DeMeco. Texans tried to get him last year and didn't happen for whatever reason. Maybe just didn't like what the organization was, which it's hard to blame them. They had won 11 games in the prior 3 years. And I do think that it's incredible. I do think that he has a high level of importance on this defense. He's more than likely going to wear the green dot. He's going to be the guy that's making the calls. He's going to get everybody in the right place. I was listening to Henry To'o today talk about how much he's meant to this defense. To'o was talking about how he's copying like his sleeping patterns and his diet because he believes in him. So it kind of sounds like DeMeco a little bit. Like whenever J.J. Watt got drafted by the Texans, he's like, well, I did whatever DeMeco was doing because it's DeMeco. Hearing Henry To'o like, yeah, I copy everything that he does because he is who he is. It's like, okay, well, that sounds a little DeMeco-y. It sounds like what DeMeco, the impression that he had on people. So I think that he has incredible value to this team. I think it was a great offseason pickup, one of the better free agent pickups. I think it's one that's often lost in the shuffle a little bit because we talk about the splashes of even Mixon and Diggs and Danielle Hunter, and it's like, hey, by the way, Azeez Al-Shaair was a free agent acquisition as well. But I have three more important defensive players over Azeez Al-Shaair. Now, they're all important. I'm not trying to demean his importance. I would just have three other guys higher. I would have both defensive ends, Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. Get to the quarterback. I think it's the name of the game nowadays in the NFL. If you can, wreak havoc on a quarterback, just change their game plan, what they're trying to do. I think it's critical from a defensive point of view. So I'd have the two defensive ends, and then I would have Stingley. I think a top corner is more important than a linebacker in the NFL these days. So I would have the two defensive ends, Stingley, and then I would have Al-Shaair fourth.
Brian?
I would go with Stingley, and the way I kind of look about it, I think you guys have talked about premier positions of baseball: center field, shortstop, up the middle. And I kind of look at that same philosophy and apply it to football with its quarterback, the left tackle who protects his blind side, his number one target is wide receiver, corner, and pass rushers, basically protecting, helping, and affecting the quarterback. And I would go with Stingley over Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. Not because Stingley's so much better. I think they're all on fairly equal footing as far as talent, although Danielle Hunter's obviously proved it much more than Stingley and Will Anderson. But I have more faith in what's behind Danielle Hunter than I do with what's behind Stingley. I have faith that guys behind Hunter and Anderson can make a difference, not only because I think they have more talent there and depth there at the pass rusher positions, but I also believe DeMeco is a great enough defensive mind where he can generate pressure. We saw them bring in Burnett off the street last year, and he was able to generate pressure pretty much right away. So I would go ahead and take Stingley because I'm less confident about what's behind him.
And that's fair. I just think that I don't think anybody's wrong in the discussion. For me, it's more like the guy.
No, those are the top four for sure.
Yeah, and I think that the guy in Al-Shaair, the guy is what they were lacking a year ago when they had two good pass rushers and they had Stingley, but they had misstep. I'm looking for a different word for that, but you could see that they had laps. And there were times where you needed that guy that could kind of read a play, make a hit. Also, kind of I think he's more athletic. He's in the prime of his career. Everything you hear out of camp too is he's just all over the field right now. And I think they were lacking that last year. A guy that can not only stop the run, but also can cover in the pass game, but is going to put his nose in and make every play from a hit standpoint too, especially stopping the run, which was a problem for them from time to time last year.
Yeah, and to kind of both of y'all's points, like, I mean, I have Anderson and Hunter higher, but you do have really good talent at the position where maybe you can miss Danielle Hunter for a couple of weeks. You can miss Will Anderson for a couple of weeks because you still have the other guy on the other end. And then to Brian's point, like, you can develop some pass rush. Barnett was fine. Hughes is a veteran that they believe in. And you're also getting Autrey back at some point who could factor in a defensive end. So you have depth there. The other two positions, I don't think you have much depth. I think that you have more depth at corner, but I think it's a huge drop-off from Stingley to Okudah and Henderson, who would be the guys filling in for Stingley. Now, the drop-off between Al-Shaair and the next linebacker, I think, is major because you're going to assume they're going to – I think they want to play more 4-3 this year. You go back and you look at the first half of their games last year. They played 4-3 a good amount. And then it's like, okay, we don't have the personnel to do this. They brought back Des King, and it's like, okay, we're going to play just nickel, 98% nickel. I think they want to play more 4-3. I don't think that they have the personnel quite yet because your top three linebackers, if Harris is healthy, is Al-Shaair, Harris, and then probably To'o. Maybe Hewitt. But how big of a drop-off is that from Al-Shaair, Harris to now To'o, and Hewitt? Unless To'o has this huge second-year jump, which I think he's a bit limited. I think he's a solid backup. He's not somebody I want playing more than 10 snaps a game, quite frankly. So that's another, I think, feather in your cap, and is an argument to your point of you go from Al-Shaair to all of a sudden, Hewitt or To'o.
I think depth is huge too. It's a huge issue of concern with no matter who you pick here. And the one thing that's at least a good thing is you'd love to have Autrey all season because then from the standpoint of having a guy that can fill in if if you lose one of the guys on the ends, or if you want to do the rotation and keep everybody fresh. I guess Jerry Hughes is on the Edwards plan of having a resurrection late in their career where they like what they see from them and they're really playing good football. But those are the three guys. If Autrey's in that discussion, then you can move him inside, outside, and he's a guy that helps you keep everybody fresh, or he can kind of put the Band-Aid on if you need, if you have an injury.
Yeah. Edwards is 6 years younger than Hughes, though.
I'm just saying he's a veteran that a lot of people thought maybe, he didn't have what he once had, and they're saying he's had a great camp. I mean, at start of camp, I didn't pencil him as a guy that was going to be a factor, and now everybody's talking about him. The key to your point, Brian, on Stingley is at least from the standpoint of where your corners could be better, no matter who your depth chart says are going to be there, is if those guys get the pass rush. If those guys are able to get to the quarterback, then there's less time to be able to throw, so there's not as much exposure. But I don't disagree. I mean, Stingley's got to be a lockdown, big time corner.
Yeah, they do play a lot of zone, so I think it might minimize the importance of a top corner. Yeah.
I mean, the league as a whole, on average, is about 70% in zone now. Until you get into the red zone, then it flips to mostly man.
I would argue that diminishes slightly the top end value of the position.
Sure, you can
I
make
think
that
if you've
argument.
got a lockdown, like, just put them on an island type.
But I mean, not to go complete football cliche, but every zone eventually turns into man. So I mean, you still need a guy, a stud like Stingley, who, when the zone turns into man, can flip and run and stay with this guy and make pass breakups.
No doubt about it. But it's why I don't think it's as important a position as defensive end.
That's a fair argument.
3897 really wanted to see Autrey perform week 1. I think we're all bummed that Autrey is going to be out 6 weeks. I actually look at the positive of it, though. Like, you get to keep an extra guy on the 53-man roster when it was going to be a tough cut because a guy who's on the suspension list does not take up a spot on the 53, which I think is a bad rule, actually. I think you should be forcing him to keep him on the 53 to force you into making a tough decision to actually penalize the team. I think it's a bad rule, but it favors the Texans here. So you get to keep that extra piece. Plus, he doesn't have the wear and tear. He's a veteran. He's older, so he doesn't have the wear and tear of playing the first 6 weeks. By the time he comes back, you probably have wear and tear on the defensive line. Yes, I'd rather have him back week 1. I just don't think that the significance and the damage it does is as great as some would let you believe.
Yeah, I think, too, thinking about when he comes back, you're going to Green Bay. The first part of the schedule is, I don't want to say it's softer, but I think they can manipulate and maneuver through that first part of the schedule. When you start turning the corner and get into, the middle of your schedule, and you start hitting a lot of those tougher opponents, having him with a full tank ready to go, no matter where the rest of your defense is, can only help you. So yeah, if you're looking for the silver lining, that's it. That he's going to be fresh after 6 games when other guys might be a little bit beat up and run down, and he can help you either spell guys and or do some things where he can come out of the gates roaring to lift up your defense. That's the positive.